Oh, hi, everyone. Hi, welcome. Welcome to MBC Launch Talks. This is Deep Breaths and Deep Conversations. My name is Nico Carey, and I am a mindfulness teacher, primarily working through an organization called Insight LA. I'm feeling very honored to be here and to have the pleasure of welcoming you to this timely and needed panel discussion. So thank you to the organizers. Thank you for having me. And thank you to the panelists. Yeah. So what we'd like to do before diving into the deep conversations is actually just open with a couple of deep breaths together. So I'll be guiding us through a short grounding meditation in a few moments. But before we begin, for anyone who has never meditated, or maybe as a reminder for all of us, just want to offer a light frame for what we're doing, which is a type of mindfulness practice. And mindfulness meditation, we could say, is really just a form of training to be more present for our lives, to be more present for all of the aliveness that's right here. It's a way for us with some intention to slow down a little and maybe listen to the body and learn from it, which can be a powerful thing to do, even for 5 minutes. As Dr. Bio Komalafe likes to say, shout out Dr. Bio, the times are urgent. We need to slow down. So this practice we're about to do is maybe just inviting us to make some space for that possibility. Okay, so be just finding a posture that feels like it'll be supportive for the next few minutes, adjusting however you need to. And we'll start and stop with the sound of this bell. Thank you. So we just gently allowing the eyes to close if that's comfortable for you. If not, feel free to leave the eyes open, maybe just with a softer gaze directed away from the screen. And keeping in mind, all of the guidance here is totally optional. And the real invitation is for you to generously take care of yourself for the next 5 minutes or so, or maybe forever. That said, if it's comfortable, maybe opening this practice with a couple deeper breaths at your own pace, a couple deeper breaths. Guide us to begin slowly. Really take your time to arrive in this moment. And I invite you to arrive with whatever is here for you today. It could be the activity of your morning, it could be whatever it took for you to get here. It could be thoughts of this panel discussion and how it's going to go. It could be news of the world, the multiple overlapping social and ecological crises. It could be what you had for breakfast. Whatever it is. If it's available, maybe just finding an orientation that says all of this is welcome. It's welcome here. If you're still breathing deeply, maybe just letting the breath be natural, its own rhythm. And then to help us with grounding and taking our time to arrive, I invite you to maybe now just kind of gently gather your attention and start turning it inward toward the body. Maybe beginning to notice all of the aliveness that's here in the physical body, all of the sensations happening. The heart is beating, the lungs are breathing, neurons are firing. There's a lot of aliveness here. Well, maybe as we breathe in, just kind of sensing all of the life energy that's here. And then on your next exhale, as we breathe out, softening, inviting some softness. So breathing out and maybe softening your brow, softening the eyelids if they're closed tight, softening the cheeks, the jaw. Breathing out and maybe letting the shoulders be soft, chest, the belly, the back body. Maybe taking one more deep breath, sensing the full aliveness of the body here. And as much as possible, letting the entire body be soft as we breathe out. And then just resting. And then as you're ready, kind of gently allowing the eyes to open and readjust to sight, light, and maybe these screens. So thank you so much for your attention and your practice there. I have the pleasure to now introduce our moderator for the panel discussion here. So Grace Tran is currently manager of global scripted series at Universal International Studios. She got her start working in CAA's marketing division. In late 2017, she joined UIS as an assistant and has been a part of the division since, working across development and current series. Some of her upcoming projects include We Are Lady Parts, Transplant, and Apples Never Fail. She continues to be incredibly excited by the creative and business opportunities in the international marketplace and loves bridging the culture gap with international partners. So welcome and thank you, Grace.
Thanks so much, Nico. Feel very zenned out. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Deep Breaths and Deep Conversations panel. I'm Grace, and I'm the manager of Global Scripted Series here at Universal International, and I'm very excited to be here and to be joined by our two wonderful panelists who I'll introduce shortly. Our conversation is hosted in partnership with NBCU Launch, which is the umbrella brand that houses the comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts across NBCU's television portfolios, and includes NBCU television and streaming, as well as Universal Studios Group, which is USG for short. As many of you know, NBC entertainment networks encompass NBC, USA, Sci-Fi, Bravo, E, Oxygen, Universal Kids, and Peacock. And on the studio side, USG is comprised of 4 powerhouse studios, including UTV, which produces shows like Hacks, Never Have I Ever, and Bel Air, and Universal Content Productions, which is known for shows like Chucky, The Umbrella Academy, Candy. And then there's Universal Television Alternative Studios, which oversees shows like Baking It and That's My Jam. And then my division is Universal International Studios, which includes shows like Weird Lady Parts, Everything I Know About Love, and the upcoming Apples Never Fall. Today I'm so excited to be joined by fellow alumni and from the NBCU Launch TV's Directors Program and the Female Forward Program, both Kim Nguyen and Jean Lee. Hey Kim, hey Jean. So Kim is a comedy director who's born in Vietnam and raised in Chicago. She directs episodic TV, short films, sketches, and commercials. And some of her works include Never Have I Ever, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Fresh Off the Boat, Superstore, just to name a few. In addition to that, she also does sketches for Comedy Central and commercial campaigns with folks like Rashida Jones, Tracy Ellis Ross, and Reese Witherspoon. And she's currently in production on a comedy feature for Hulu, which is super exciting. And then we have the lovely Jean. Jean's a first-gen Korean American writer-director from Allenstown, Pennsylvania, who loves global cinema, genre, and stories that make her laugh. And I think it's worth noting that Jean has directed in 9 languages, spanning 7 countries and 5 continents. That's impressive, to say the least. Her absurdist comedy feature, Pecado Original, was the first ever Paraguayan and American co-pro and was picked up by HBO after an award-winning festival circuit. And she's currently developing her second feature, which is a Korean folk horror film called Polly Wants to Eat You. So complete opposite of what your first film was, it sounds like. So I'm so excited to have you both here. Thank you for joining. During our conversation, our panelists will be providing best practices for navigating the entertainment industry as an Asian creative and managing stress in the workplace. We're going to deep dive into topics such as handling familial pressures and just kind of learning about healthy support systems. So Jean, Kim, welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. I mean, we had that great meditation session with Nico. And for me, I think, Kim, you were saying this earlier in our conversation, how awesome it would be to just be able to start every meeting with just like a 5-10 minute, like mellow meditation moment. I'm curious for you both, like, what are some stress reducing techniques or outlets you guys kind of utilize to maintain just your mental health or just kind of upkeep that?
Sure, I'll go first. First of all, it's so nice to be here. Hi to everybody. It's a real treat to be able to like hang out with the community and do this kind of like deeper dive into mental wellness. I would say like actually the breathing exercises is really great. And I think something as a director, it's so helpful because there are exercises and things you can do within a really short frame of time, which is, you know, as directors, we very seldom have extra time. So taking a couple of minutes to breathe is always good, or check in with yourself. There was a series I did recently where every day we would start off with, and it was our cinematographer. We had an amazing female cinematographer on the series. But it was her idea to start every day with a 10-second sort of breathing in and breathing out and just grounding ourselves. And I thought that was really great. And so did everybody else. It's something I'll probably try to look into doing on some of my other projects too. But breathing techniques, checking in with yourself, just finding times during the day and during the length of the project to be able to consistently do those things.
Definitely. Jean, what do you think?
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I'd like to echo, I want Nico just to follow me around every day with his bell and his calm, soothing voice, and to come to all my sets. So I think that one of the roles as a director is to be able to give and nourish your community on set. And I think that in order to be able to do that, you yourself have to be full. You can't be empty and show up and be able to nourish others. So a practice that I do every morning is I actually hold my cat, my 16-year-old cat. her name's Nina Simone, after the jazz singer. And I hold her and I look at the window and we say a prayer together. And
love
that actually, yeah, and it only takes a few minutes, but particularly when I'm directing TV, that's something I do every morning before I start the crazy day.
Oh, that's amazing. You need to bring Nina to set.
Yes, Nina and Nico.
And Nico. That's
That
amazing.
will end the panel.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
If Nina makes a cameo in this, that won't be the worst thing in the world.
She might.
No, but Jean, you touched on something that's really interesting that I think not that many folks know, but like you were saying, you know, when you're a director on set, you are kind of the captain of the ship. You are responsible for the morale in a way. I'm just curious, because that is so much of your job and you take that on with your actors, and you know, sometimes your writer comes on set, like, what tools have you kind of found helpful to make sure that you stay full as a human, and outlets that you might have?
One of the ways that I'm able to do that is to challenge myself to have a mindset of having more fun, actually. Because everybody wants to have fun. Everybody loves playing games for the most part. And so approaching it from, for example, on an episodic shoot, a puzzle, figuring out a puzzle and doing it together and figuring out the answers together. And just having that mindset of a team effort with the game of figuring it out, I think is it's healthier and it's helpful. So that's one of the things I do.
Awesome.
Oh, that's a cool idea, Jean. I like that. Yeah, same with Gina. I mean, I think it's like definitely, you know, directing is a lot of things, but it's also a lot of fun too. And I mean, I work primarily in the comedy space, so that's already, I just like the set and the vibe. I think I gravitate towards that just anyway, you know, just being able to laugh all day long is a pretty good thing. Just it's a good outlet. In addition to that, though, you know, you were saying, Grace, and I think this is like a really salient point too, to Jean's thing as well, about when you're directing, you know, you really are kind of the tuning fork for the set, and you're going to have a lot of personalities and a lot of different kinds of energies. And what you're putting out essentially kind of sets the tone and the stage for a lot of things. So I think it's always really good to check in and be healthy with that. I like the community building aspects of things, the camaraderie. I like getting to know people. You know, I'm sure we'll touch upon this as we continue talking, but I feel like the pandemic over the past few years, it's been really challenging, obviously, for a lot of people at home and a lot of people at the workspace, and in particular in production, where I feel like, you know, directors were already kind of like in a siloed group as it is anyway. We kind of operate in our own worlds, but we touch all the other worlds of production. I think it became even more so because we had the masks and all the protocols that we were doing things with. But you know, at the end of the day, it's a collective of people coming together to create something great. And so, you know, just little things that I like to do is like, on my projects, it's like, you know, name tags so everybody knows who they are. And then like a fun fact, like what's your favorite comedy, you know, or what's your favorite podcast or something like that. It gives a little something to connect everybody. And especially when you're kind of moving through spaces. And since the past couple of years, we had these protocols in place, it just gave a nice little extra connection other than, you know, just like this.
Totally. And you bring up a good point where, like, with the pandemic and kind of the new protocols that were put into place on sets, like it's harder to kind of just navigate the regularity that you normally have without those masks, and just everyone kind of just feeling like they need to be a little bit further apart. I'm curious, like, how did you navigate stressful situations pre-COVID, post-COVID on set, and like how do you stay calm in the face of stress?
So are we asking like us for stressful situations?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah, like with just, COVID kind of throwing a wrench into, I don't know if you guys were in
Sure.
production on anything and COVID happened. Like, how did you deal with the stress of, oh my gosh, how do we continue in the face of a pandemic, or even something on a smaller level too, where it's like, oh my gosh, we're not making days or something. Like, how do you just kind of respond to those stressful situations, and what kind of tools have you found helpful for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really want to tap into your team with things, because it really is a community effort at that point to be able to have gotten through what we've gotten through over the past couple of years and still be able to like create stories and put that out on a consistent and regular basis, I think is sort of a phenomenal feat for our entire industry, made up of our larger community and all the smaller communities. But, you know, I was in pre-production on something when we got the, you know, we got the call to like basically stand down. We didn't pick up that project again for many, many, many months. And when we all returned, we were different. We were different. Everything was different. And I have to say that it's like, I was so happy to have like the core people still in place that I'd already been friendly with. I think it's really important to be able to build that community on a set, regardless of whether or not you're a guest director coming in for an episode or whether you're there for a longer duration or it's a different kind of project. But those are the things, like being able to figure out, it's like, okay, well, we still have to do the same amount of work that we had to do before. Like that didn't change, but everything else changed. So how are we going to do this? Being able to find new ways to communicate, for example, like with the mask, with talent and everything, being able to, there was always a way. And that's what I find like so interesting and resilient about the great people that we work with, and hopefully within ourselves too. There's a resiliency, there's a problem solving, but it all starts with being communicative and also being open to the different channels and dialogues, and also being open to the different ways that we can do things. That was just my personal experience.
Great.
Yeah, and I would say to build off of that, I think part of the job of TV directing is to be a great troubleshooter and a problem solver. That's an important skill to have. And on my last episode I directed, this great AD told me, we were talking about the characteristics of a strong TV director. And we were discussing about how TV directing is very much a performance art, because you have to prep as much as you can before you show up on the day, but then anything goes. You know, on one episode, I had an actor get COVID and test positive in the middle of the shooting day, and we had to pull the plug. You know, you lose the location, somebody doesn't show up, and that's just part of the nature of the beast. And it goes back to, I think, expecting that those things will happen, that this puzzle will arrive at your doorstep without any notice. And then you just jump in and you solve it with, as Kim was mentioning, your community and your team. And it's what you're doing in the moment that counts just as much as what you've brought to the moment in your preparation.
Yeah, I think like sort of being able to approach it with like, you know, like Jane's saying, but just like knowing that it's like, oh, you know, the second you basically start a production, things start happening and like curveballs start being thrown. So I always think that's like really funny. And I just feel like, you know, whatever the approach that you have to problem solving, I wouldn't say like I'm somebody who like actively gets excited about problems. I definitely don't. But I would say that it's like I find that is just like a part of filmmaking, and I love filmmaking, so it's part and parcel for me. And if you're somebody who can like learn to thrive in that type of environment, like good on you, because you know that's pretty much a large part of the gig all the time. But knowing that it's like you're going into a never-ending sort of changing set of variables, you know, part of that's also kind of exciting. You got a good team with you, it's going to get done, it's going to be great. But knowing that is definitely going to be a part of it, I think is kind of half the battle of it too.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, kind of just like, was that something that you had anticipated prior to, you know, becoming directors? I guess I'm just curious, like, yeah, what do you wish you kind of knew before going into this, and kind of how did you get your foot in the door? Just kind of backtracking a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I didn't realize that there would be that many curveballs being thrown all the time. I don't know actually if it would have been a good thing to have known that before I got in, because that just feels like now, kind of looking at the rearview mirror of it all, that feels like it's like, oh yeah, like all of that those things happen. But in real time, it is like definitely you're definitely like basically like moving through the process all the time with it. I think probably if I were to look back and think about like, oh, things that would have been helpful for me to have known about is like, oh yeah, definitely. Like we're this whole thing we're talking about, like the community building and the teams and the camaraderie and stuff, like finding the group of people that you feel great with, that you can like use as like touchstones. And, my start into episodic was through Female Forward. And that was really critical for me, and amazingly so. I'm still, I'm great friends with the directors that were in my group, and Jean and I are friends. I mean, it created a community for me that was so incredibly helpful in terms of like not just my actual peers, but also the executives and the one, like everybody is so supportive. They continue to check in like all the time, like, hey, I saw you're doing this amazing thing. Anything I can do to like help out. It really created this sort of springboard for me, also in the sense that it's like I had people I could ask questions for. Because of the program and the way it was designed, I was able to shadow on the show I was going to direct for 2 episodes, which was huge. These are things now that I look back on and realize like, oh, that's really awesome that I was able to like experience those things with those people who were primed and ready for like me to be a part of that experience. So I'd say that, 1, that's how I got into directing episodic, but 2, the relationships that I formed and the support system that I was able to be a part of, I think that's like probably one of the most like critical parts to having like a healthy sort of experience in this business. And also like just again, like the lifelong sort of like and career-long friendships and relationships that I've made too.
Absolutely. Jean, what about you?
So I came up through like a global cinema independent filmmaking background. And I would like to say at first that feature directing, especially like independent, your story feature film directing, is very different than episodic directing. They're 2 different beasts. But the way that I came up, I think really helped inform and give me the skill set and the tools for TV directing. And it was, you had mentioned, Grace, that I directed in many different countries. And the cool thing about that is you're thrown into a community as a guest. And you tell your story in this, and usually in a foreign language, with a community that you haven't met, but that you have to build trust with. And you get your story, you try to leave it better or not worse than when you arrived, and then you leave. And I think it's a similar situation with TV directing, where you come in as a guest, you steer the ship, you get what needs to be done, and then that's it. So that's sort of how I got my break. As far as episodic directing, the way I got my break was like Kim through the NBCU Female Forward program. Which at the time, Kim, I think when we did it, was one of the fewer studio programs that offered that guaranteed episodes upon the end of the course after shadowing 1 or 2 episodes. And so it was this incredible vote of confidence / investment, not just in your first gig or your second gig, but your entire career, a real stamp of approval. And it was an incredibly competitive program as well. And it just shows you how much strong talent is out there in general, particularly amongst people of color and women, and the DEI community, which is, it's very exciting to me. So that's sort of how I came in through the 2. Yeah, I think I'm not answering. What was the second question that you asked?
You answered it. Yeah. But no, you bring up a really good point. It's like you bring up so many good points, actually, in the sense where I think programs like the DEI Director Launch Program, I think, is so important. And I think the idea and the practice of shadowing is also something that's crucial for giving directors really the lay of the land and making sure that they have the tools in order to succeed. And I think, Jean, we were talking about this, where it's like, how do you kind of navigate the line of being respectful when you're like, you are a guest on the set, but it's just like, how do you kind of navigate those difficult situations if there is ever conflict?
Yeah, definitely. I think the role of the shadow is actually one that needs to be demystified a little bit more. I think it's better with the level of the greater level of communication that's happening with the help of the programs, with people who have graduated from the programs and are giving back to the community. But I do think that first and foremost, it's important to remember that you're a guest and that your role there is not to add to the craziness that already exists on set. And at the same time, not just learning, but also figuring out ways to build relationships and be taken seriously. Because the other thing is, certain individuals will look at you and make their own opinions about you without knowing anything about you or why you're there. And then certain individuals will be super warm and welcoming and see you for who you are and take an interest in you as an artist and as a director. So it really is about, I think with shadowing, it's really about developing the skill of reading people well and understanding when it's time to say something and when it's time to not say something, even if you have an opinion. It's not always the right moment to speak up, right? And so that was the thing that I've really learned throughout the process and in going through it myself and seeing other people do it, that it really is about reading the room, which you have to be good at once you start directing. And also having wisdom in knowing when to speak up and when to say something. My friend, who is very wise, told me that there's sort of three main things to consider when you're thinking about whether to say something. And it's, is it the right time to say something? Is what you're saying the right thing to be saying? And number three, are you the right person to be saying it? So and I think that's something that Nico brought up earlier, which is when it's an urgent situation to slow down. I think that's actually really relevant here, where if you can just take a pause and be a little bit more mindful and thoughtful about those things. It's challenging to do that when you're in the heat of the moment, right? And obviously, you learn as you go. And so you have to be forgiving of yourself maybe earlier on, but it's definitely a muscle and a tool that I think is valuable. And that's helpful throughout the process.
I would say too, like that is something that is applicable to directing, but also just to life generally. Like hearing those words of wisdom, I'm like, oh, that also applies to my professional life as well as my personal life. So I think that that's really, really smart and really wise words of advice for everybody here. And I'm curious too, like, especially since you both are Asian women in directing, have you guys ever encountered kind of, I hate to say microaggressions, but kind of just moments where you're like, oh, this is not, I wouldn't be treated this way if I were a male, or you're like, this is weird. Why are you treating me this way? Or like, have you kind of ever found yourselves in those situations in the past?
I mean,
Sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
Sure thing. I mean, I think like microaggressions, macroaggressions, I think being, excuse me, being female, being a woman of color, I mean, these are still pretty prevalent things in terms of the journey that we need to kind of do as a larger community in order for us to have like true equality and all of the things that we are always working towards. I would say like in terms of like applying it to specifically for directing though, one of the things that I think is really interesting is that when you come on to a set that's not a project that you're helming yourself like from the get-go or anything, like a lot of times it's not like people know, and I'll speak as specifically, I'll say like maybe certain individuals, not like as a group or like departments or anything like that. But you may come on and it's like people don't necessarily know who you are or know your background or know your IMDb or know your credits or all of the things that you did to basically get to where you are in that day. They may just like, they may just see like another director. And there's definitely been a couple of times where like an individual may have like basically indicated that it's like, oh yeah, oh, that's great that you're directing an episode. And there's they may also have had sort of they wanted to also direct over the years for, let's say, for example, but they haven't had a chance to. And because of the slots are being sort of the way that they're kind of like being allocated and stuff. And the thing that I have really taken away from everything is that it's like, you can't assume that people know who you are, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you change who you are. The confidence of knowing what I did to get to those stages, what I did to get to every single point of my career and how earned it's been, that's something that's within me and that like will radiate out with my leadership and how I direct. But that is something that I really wanted to share with other women of color as well. When you're going through these things and it's like you don't have the opportunity to sit there and say like, oh, hey, I did these things, and these things. Like sometimes it's literally just like a quick passing conversation or a dismissive comment or something. And just knowing who you are and what you're about, and that you absolutely are to be there at that time. Just have confidence in yourself. Take that with you wherever you go. It is the one thing, it's like one of your superpowers. So it really doesn't matter who else is out there or what anybody is saying. You know who you are.
That's so well said, Kim. I would say you're actually so good at that. When I met Kim for the first time, and you can tell, you can see, she's just so calm and grounded. And there's a level of like immediate and subconscious respect that comes with that, where you're like, oh, that person knows who they are and why they're here. And so it's sometimes, to Kim's point, it's not about like being like, oh, these are the things I did. Here's my IMDb. Let me share it with you, right? It's just being quiet and grounded. That does so much more than a billion words would. So that was so well said, Kim.
Totally. And I feel like I'm curious, how do you feel the industry is doing in terms of just creating the safer spaces and moments, I guess, just systems in place for accountability? Like as directors, how do you feel the industry is doing from where you started to where it is now?
That's a great question.
And I think it's dependent on the show that you go on and the network, because it also then is like the studio and stuff like that that's involved. But just on your day-to-day, I guess we can take this on a more macro level too, if you want to apply it to the industry as a whole, as opposed to just kind of your sets. But I'll say for me personally that I think that there's been a lot more accountability in terms of just keeping your coworkers in check about, what they say. And I think there's a lot more permission to, at least for me, to speak more openly about things. If I'm reading a project that it feels problematic to me, I'll be like, hey guys, like this is not something you should pursue for X, Y, and Z reason. And I feel like it's definitely something that is encouraged now more so. But I'm curious, just from your guys' perspective, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's true, Grace. I agree with you on that. I also think that it's like now, because there is that increase and that uptick in females on set, also in leadership positions, as well as people of color, women of color, because there's a greater representation. I think that is one of the things that has like built more of that safer space that we feel in general, and it has also created more of a voice for a lot of us, because it feels less like one voice sort of in the wind and more like there's multiple voices that can band together. And, we've seen this throughout the past couple of years of the momentum that a groundswell can create in terms of like for accountability and also just for the other things too, like building the momentum. I mean, there was I started to put on my commercial projects, for example, on the call sheets, like a statement about harassment and how like that was not going to be acceptable. And here was who to reach out to in case any of that was doing it, like feeling more enabled to really be able to stand solo or also with everybody else to say like no toxicity. It will not be permitted in any shape or form. Feels really empowering, and it's still, of course, we have a ways to go with that, obviously, but just saying that it's like for us to be able to have this panel, I mean, Jean is so incredibly accomplished, and to be able to sit here and have this space to be able to say these things, this is something that I don't feel like I saw when I was starting out in the industry. But I would have loved to have seen, I would have loved to have known that these types of resources are out there and these types of conversations are being held and that I could be a part of them.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's definitely changed since I first moved out to LA in 2013. And back then, somebody who I really respected told me, Jean, don't make your first feature with an Asian American cast, because then you'll never be able to work on mainstream content. So going from there to now, I think there has been a big change, obviously with a lot more to go, but nonetheless change. And then in response to your other question about addressing sort of diversity and inclusion on set, I think it sort of, for me, revolves around, I think one way to think about it is 3 levels. So there's the individual person, there's the community or your allies, other individuals, and then there's the public dialogue. So Grace, when you were talking about, you could tell your team like, hey, this doesn't work for me, or like, hey, we should be more mindful about this. There's a public dialogue that exists now with language that is somewhat familiar, like we had mentioned the word microaggressions or diversity and inclusion. This is language that I think more and more people are becoming aware of, and therefore individuals and allies can draw upon that language, which empowers us to talk about and give voice to things that might be difficult to describe or communicate on set, like microaggressions, like racism, like subconscious racism. And I think that's really powerful. And that public dialogue has changed significantly since when I first started out. That's exciting to see. As far as individuals, I see a lot more people being courageous about speaking up, about signaling to other people on set that, hey, I'm an ally, hey, I'm here with you. And I think a lot of that has happened over a long period of time, over a lot of individuals coming together and speaking up at a time when there were no other allies on set. And so, again, I think that there is a long way to go. And I think that's reflected in the numbers that have been published by the Gina Davis Institute, by the DGA reports, by Annenberg School. And you'll see in those statistics and those numbers that we do, in fact, have a long way to go. However, again, it's exciting because I see that there's hope, and I see that I'm a beneficiary of the hard work that people have put in before me, and it inspires me to continue doing that hard work for the people coming up behind me as well.
That's amazing. It's so funny that you mentioned the Gina Davis and the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative in college. I was part of that, and
oh, cool.
It's been so fantastic to see it grow from what it was to what it is now, and it being a tool for so many of the folks in our industry. And I'm curious, what are there any organizations, whether they are AAPI or non-AAPI, that kind of have helped influence your journey as a director and kind of have given you that sense of community or allyship that you've really leaned on in your career?
Oh yeah, I've definitely been so encouraged and supported by the communities that I've been fortunate to be a part of throughout my career growth. So I came out through the Sundance Screenwriters Intensive in LA. That's how I moved out here. I did Film Independent Directors Program. So Film Independent was a great community. The AFI Directing Workshop for Women, obviously NBCU Female Forward. And recently, I'm in the Women's Steering Committee at the DGA, and that's so awesome too. Like, it's just so cool to see people who are sort of going through it with you, and to be able to just, either just like talk about stresses or just share resources. And I think Kim had mentioned this earlier, but just really understanding that even though directing is one person's job, usually it is a community and a team sport. And that goes beyond just the immediate episode or project that you're on, right? Like Kim and I have never worked on a project together, but still we're like yesterday, we were hopping on the phone and talking about like, how can we make sure that we mention certain things here today and support one another. And It really is just very difficult and lonely without a group supporting you. And whether that be in the official capacities, like the organizations I just mentioned, or it just be through friendships that you develop by meeting people along the way. That's great. And then separately, I know CAPE has been doing a lot of good work. I was also in Ryan Murphy's HAF program. They're also very supportive. And then outside of directing, and the reason why I'm putting language to these programs is hopefully some of the people listening today can look those up and also apply or get involved. And then non-work related organizations I wanted to mention, because these were actually very helpful and informative to me, was when I first started directing, I definitely needed therapy. I think therapy is so beneficial and helpful to a lot of people. And I have found in my family, at least, and in the culture that I've experienced, mental health and therapy, and we might get into this later, is a little bit taboo sometimes. And so talking about it a little bit more openly, I think, helps demystify that. So I wanted to mention some organizations before I forget that offer low cost, affordable sliding scale therapy for anybody, both in person and online. So they're WILA, WILA, Maple, Valley Behavioral Health, and Airport Marina. And so if anybody is looking for therapy, either to talk about the stresses of directing or anything else, those are four cool organizations that you can look to get affordable therapy, because therapy can be very, very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you?
Yeah, well, similar to Jean, I think, some of the organizations that I've been a part of, we talked about, like, did Female Forward. Also, I did the Sony Lab, and when it was operating, like the Fox at the time, the Fox Lab, and those were great for the same sort of reasons that we've talked about, like, which is basically being able to meet other diverse filmmakers who were at similar points in my career, being able to build those relationships, and also with the executives. Definitely, I love also the DGA Women's Steering Committee that Jean's talking about. I'm also a part of that. And then there's the Asian American community as well in the DGA that I found to be great resources in terms of offering workshops and panels and different things that are, like, important for the different parts of your career, but also underlying it with the fellowship of our peers and a diverse group, which has been really nice. For myself, I probably also just have a lot of, like, the smaller groups that I talk to. It's interesting. I actually talk to quite a lot of my friends in the programs a lot, regardless of when we did those programs together. And I think part of that is just we have these shared experiences as we've all moved along in our respective routes, and some of my friends from those, they're not even in directing anymore, but the bonds that we created were really strong. But yeah, I think, like, anytime there's an opportunity to kind of connect with and dip into a little bit with the culture, that's good. It's something I actively try to seek out also with the projects that I take on. I did a PSA with Henry Golding a couple of years ago for AAPI month. And that was just things like that, where it's like, I want to take time to also connect with our community, as well as, like, and if it can fold in also with, like, the work that I'm doing, that's, like, even better. But I find that I need that for myself every few years in order to be able to sort of, like, touchstone back to the village, so to speak.
Absolutely. And speaking of the village, whether it is your found family from work or your cohorts or your actual family, I think it's worth talking about just kind of what it is to be an Asian creative, and the familial pressures that kind of come with a lot of families not really understanding or necessarily supporting the arts for a multitude of reasons. And I'm curious, kind of, have you ever had to deal with, like, pressures, parental familial pressures, to pursue a career that's outside of entertainment, that has more stability, that is much more, in a way, palatable for some folks to be like, my kid's a lawyer, my kid's a doctor, and kind of, yeah, how did you deal with those expectations that were put on you?
Yeah, definitely 100% with my family. I mean, my family immigrated from Vietnam. We're from a small area from there, and my mother has very deep roots within her Vietnamese community. I think, they would have been a lot, I don't even have to think, they told me this. They would have been a lot more comfortable probably had I pursued a path where it's a lot more sort of like behind the scenes.
Mm.
I think the idea of and my mom's like a wonderful person and will only, want the best for me. But I think a lot of it is like I chose such a different trajectory than a lot of Vietnamese kids when I was growing up. But I think being in a position of being a female and being in a position of leadership, power, authority, having any kind of platform, I think is very intimidating. Was very intimidating for my family because that equals exposure, vulnerability. And therefore, I feel like the community, at least that I grew up with, was much more protective, much more, I would actually say secretive. It was just very much like, let's always think about the presentation of sort of how we want to present ourselves. And it was a lot of just, so when I chose this path, I had to decide at a pretty early on that this was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to express myself. I started off as a writer, and that was not met with a lot of enthusiasm because I could have done all the things. And particularly, I think my parents would have really enjoyed me pursuing something in medicine or something like that, something where you wear like a real uniform
Mm.
to work every day and you can take pictures of it and everybody can look at it and acknowledge what we understand about it. So I think the idea that it's like I was going to work, going to set, wearing jeans and like t-shirts, and I just didn't look in any way like what I
Mhm.
think they feel like an executive or somebody
Mhm.
successful looks like.
Yeah.
All of that has been a real learning experience, and I think still to this day even, and it's like I think now my mom's like really excited because she'll be like, I took a screen grab of your name and I shared it with all my friends and they're really excited. But it took a long time to get there. And sometimes I also feel like, well, something that I want to impart because I'm a mother to my child is that it's like, but even if it didn't really work out that way, even if it's like I had pursued this and I never got the directing credit or those things, I find I'm trying to instill in my child that it's like, it's the process and the journey and the exploration and the expression of who you are that I want to celebrate. And the end result will be what the end result is. But to me, the value is in the journey.
That's beautiful.
Oh, that's so great, Kim. Like there's some things that you said that really inspired me. So like the word protective, I think is a really appropriate one, because I think that's where a lot of the wishes of our parents come from, right? They want us to have good lives. And so the idea of, well, I have never seen somebody who looks like you do this, and therefore that concerns me, is legitimate.
Mhm.
Right. And so maybe one day when, Kim, when your kid's going into the industry, the narrative will be a little different, right? Because you yourself have done it. But when we were doing it, that wasn't the case, right? And so that created a lot of fear in my parents. And I remember my mom said, you're an Asian and you're a woman. Will people respect you? Because I don't know if they will, because I've just never seen that in that context. And I remember I read Michael Caine's book on acting, and he says, if there is anything else you can do, then go do it. And I applied that to directing, and I was like, there's nothing else I can do. I was pre-law at the time. I went to a good school. I'd taken the LSATs. I was ready to go. So it was even more disappointing to my parents that I was like, never mind. But I had a real come to Jesus moment, and I was like, yes, Michael Caine, I must do this. And so I told my parents, I was like, you guys don't have to support me in any way. I will figure it out. I went and worked for like an Amish farmer. I went and taught SATs. I lived on people's couches. Like I got a scholarship to go to film school. I didn't know that lenses came off of cameras. And I think that when there is a real passion and focus behind it, anything is possible. And that was sort of the attitude that I had going into it. And then Kim, something that you had said at the end of what you were saying about basically dreaming dreams. There's this great director who was a cinematographer, Michael Goy, who's in the Asian American Steering Committee. And he talks about how the thing he wants to teach his kids is to dream big. But if you're going to dream big, then also you need to figure out how to make those dreams real. And so I don't think he'd mind me sharing this, but he built a train track around his house to show his kids, like, sure, you can have a train going around your house. You can imagine that, but how do we make that into a reality and to inspire them that way? And I think that for me was so inspirational. And that's something I want to impart to the next generation, which is you can dream whatever you like, but let's make that real. How can we empower you and give you the tools to make those things into a reality? So yeah, there's definitely cultural and familial pressures, but I do think that the more they see, Kim's name on the beginning of a major show, or Grace, you calling shots at Universal, right? Like, it's the more that people will be like, oh, this is possible. I'm not so scared anymore. There's a face I recognize who looks like my daughter's, my son's, my child's, that is already in that space. And so for me, that's very exciting. I'm getting very passionate.
No,
I like that one of
absolutely.
the takeaways is going to be, we stand Michael Caine.
Exactly. Michael Caine needs to see this. We'll send this to him.
Right.
Well, I know that we're running close to time, so I just wanted to thank you both so much, and I think that's the best way to end this, and on such a positive, hopeful note. And I just wanted again to thank you both for this honest and thoughtful conversation and for sharing your experiences with all of us here. And I also wanted to thank the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival and NBCU Launch for organizing this discussion. And I'm going to plug this team a little bit, but to learn more about the NBCU Launch group and to get more updates on their programs and initiatives, please visit their website, which is just www.nbcuniversallaunch.com, or join the social media community at NBCU Launch on Instagram. And again, thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with all of us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yay.
Jean, so good seeing you too.
You
Keep killing it, sis. All right.
Bye.
Bye all.